Okay, so we've all heard that probiotics are good for your gut, right? But what if they could do way more than that? What if the secret to a happier mind isn't in your head at all, but hiding in your stomach? I know it sounds a little like science fiction, doesn't it? But a huge new scientific review decided to tackle that exact question to find the truth. And honestly, their results might just change how we think about mental health forever. So let's dive in and break down what they actually discovered. All right, so first things first. Why even look to the gut for answers about mental health in the first place? Well, it's because the stakes are just incredibly high. Think about this number, 300 million. That's how many people worldwide are suffering from depression. And there's another 300 million dealing with anxiety disorders. The impact on individual lives, on families, and, on the whole global economy, it's just massive. And look, traditional treatments absolutely help a lot of people, but they aren't a perfect solution for everyone, right? Some medications have pretty significant side effects. We're talking nausea, fatigue, stuff that's hard to live with. And for some people, they just don't work. So that reality has really pushed researchers to explore new, maybe even safer approaches. And that's what led them to start looking at the gut. The whole idea, the entire foundation for this, hinges on a concept called the gut-brain axis. The easiest way to think about it is like a superhighway of information, a two-way street that's constantly buzzing with traffic between your brain and your gut. And all those trillions of microbes living down there, they're basically major players on this highway. Scientists now believe they can actually influence our thoughts and our emotions. Pretty wild, right? Okay, and that's where these three things come in. You've got your probiotics, those are the good live bacteria themselves. Then you have prebiotics, which are basically the food for those good bacteria, helping them thrive. And symbiotics? Well, that's just a strategic, powerful combo of both. These are the exact tools researchers are using to see if they can, positively change that conversation happening on the gut-brain highway. So we're hunting for scientific proof. Because, an idea is one thing, but actual scientific proof, that's a whole different ballgame. The field has just been flooded with studies. But honestly, the results have been all over the map. One study says one thing, another says the opposite. It makes it really hard to know what's actually true. And this quote from the research paper we're looking at today just says it all. Current research results have been inconsistent. So the big question is, are these supplements actually helpful or not? To get a real solid answer, scientists knew they needed a much more powerful approach. And that's where something called a meta-analysis comes in. It's a really cool technique. Instead of just looking at one single study, a meta-analysis gathers up all the high-quality research on a topic and smashes the data together. The analogy on the slide is perfect. It's like polling the polls to find the real underlying trend. This is seriously one of the strongest forms of scientific evidence we've got. And let me tell you, this was no small task. The researchers started with, get this, nearly 6,400 studies. Then, through this incredibly rigorous screening process, they filtered all of that down to just the 72 best-designed, most solid clinical trials. We're talking about data from over 6,000 different people. Okay, so here we are, the verdict on mental health. After sifting through 72 different studies and all that data from thousands of people, what did they find? What's the final verdict? Let's take a look. First up, depression. And wow, the results were really clear here. When you compare them to a placebo, the people who were taking these gut health supplements showed a significant improvement in their depression scores. That is a really powerful signal that these things have a real measurable effect. Okay, so what about anxiety? Well, the story was pretty much the same. The analysis found a statistically significant drop in anxiety scores for the groups taking the supplements. So yet another big win for this whole gut-brain connection idea. They didn't stop there. The researchers also looked at sleep, which, as we all know, is super closely tied to our mood. And guess what? Same story. Probiotics led to a significant improvement in sleep quality. So, across the board, depression, anxiety, and sleep, the big headline verdict was definitely positive. But science is never quite that simple, is it? A big positive result is fantastic. But the real question, the one we all want to know is, does it work for me? Who do these treatments actually work for, and under what specific conditions? And this is where things get really interesting and, frankly, much more practical for you and me. The researchers dug way deeper into the data, and they found that the effects are absolutely not one size fits all. The benefits can actually change quite a bit depending on who is taking the supplements, for how long, and even which specific type they're using. Okay, let's really break this down because the details here are super important. If we look at depression, the benefits were seen pretty much across the board. Didn't matter if you had depression, were healthy, or had other chronic illnesses. But then look at anxiety. This is where we see a fascinating twist. The supplements helped healthy people and those with chronic illness, but, and this is the surprising part, they did not seem to work for people who already had a depressive disorder. Really interesting. Now, what about timing? For depression, the length of treatment mattered. The best effects were seen in trials that lasted up to 12 weeks. For anxiety, though, the benefits were there no matter how long the treatment was. And finally, the specific type of bug mattered for anxiety. Bifidobacterium and mixed strains, they worked, but lactobacillus all by itself, not so much. Okay, now, as exciting as all of this sounds, we have to take a step back. Good science is always about being honest and admitting what you don't know. And the researchers behind the study were very, very clear that we need an important reality check. So why the caution? Well, for one, there was a ton of variation between the 72 studies they looked at. In fact, less than 20% of them were rated as having a low risk of bias. What that means in plain English is that the positive effects we saw might actually be overestimated. They also found something called publication bias for the depression studies. That's a sneaky problem where studies that find positive results are just more likely to get published, which can totally skew the big picture. And the scientists who did all this hard work said it best themselves. Their final message is this: therefore, these results need to be interpreted with caution. It's all about cautious optimism. The evidence is definitely promising, but it is not the final word on the subject. So, with all that in mind, what's the big takeaway here? How could this incredible connection between our gut, our brain's second brain, actually be working? Well, researchers have a few leading theories on how it might all work. First, it's back to that gut-brain axis. The microbes are definitely sending signals up that highway to the brain. Second, they seem to reduce inflammation in the body, and we're learning more and more about how inflammation is linked to depression. And third, and this is maybe the coolest part, they might actually help create key neurotransmitters like serotonin and GABA, that's a calming chemical, right there in your gut. So when you put it all together, what's the bottom line from this deep dive? Look, these interventions are not a miracle cure. Let's be clear about that. But what this huge review does show is that they are a genuinely promising adjunctive treatment. That means they could be a great therapy to use alongside other treatments. The evidence points to, yes, they can help, but the science is still young. There is just so much more for us to learn. And that really leaves us with this one big, fascinating question. Is the future of mental health care located in our gut? We are just scratching the surface here, just beginning to understand the immense power of our body's microbiome. So while we wait for more research to come out, this study gives us a pretty compelling reason to believe that taking care of our second brain might just be one of the most important things we can do for our first.